This episode may contain strong language or topics that some may find offensive. Listener discretion is advised for anyone under 13.
First time you and I have gotten to ever meet or whatever, so get to know a little bit about you and stuff. So where were you born and where'd you grow up?
Well, I was born in California, but I spent a lot of time not in California, so I don't consider myself Californian.
Yeah.
I was born in San Diego, but my parents split up when I was a child. We moved to Washington State, where a lot of my mother's family lives, and still does, actually. So I grew up there, grew up in small towns. My graduating class, public high school, 25 years ago, was 50 people.
Oh, wow.
And that was the largest class in history, in school history at the time.
Yeah, it's about the size of high school or schools I went to in northern Idaho, yes. Smaller in Elk City, where I grew up. But anyway, so yeah, and spent a lot of time just not knowing what I was meant to do. Ended up doing IT just because I could, and it paid the bills. Mm-hmm. So I did that for a while. Things like politics and writing were hobbies on the side. Yeah.
So I never thought I'd be making my living in those worlds. I did always enjoy writing and debating politics and theology on message boards back in the early 2000s. That's kind of where I cut my teeth with debates and, honing my own philosophy. It's iron sharpening iron.
Yeah.
I've always been a bit of a political junkie. One of my earliest memories, political memories, was watching the 1992 presidential election returns. That's where Bill Clinton defeated President Bush.
Ah.
So that was one of my earliest disappointments, too, in politics. Growing up, though, in Washington State, that state hasn't elected a Republican governor since before I was born. So we did have a couple statewide Republicans when I was in my 20s and early 30s, but now they're all gone.
Yeah.
That state has gone full blue. And that's one of the reasons we chose to move. Got married a little over 10 years ago, and we lived in Washington for a while near my family. Bought a house, but then just cost of living was going up, taxes and regulation was going up, and the general social climate of the state was going very, very far left.
Yeah.
So we decided to move. A lot of my wife's family had moved out to the Treasure Valley, and so we decided to follow them, raise our children in a place where our values and our beliefs are still considered normal rather than weird and fringe and extreme.
Yeah.
Since then, we've had 3 more children, so 3 of my 5 children are born here in Idaho.
Oh, cool.
That gives me some roots here. Sometimes I joke and say that I'm a lifelong resident of Idaho since 2018. But no, I try to take the time to understand those who have long pedigrees here. But at the same time, I think there's national movements. A lot of people coming from California because of what's happening there, and same thing from Washington and Oregon.
Yeah.
They're bringing a lot of needed energy to politics here. One of the things I noticed, though, about politics is that back in Washington, I felt like there was a wall between the people and the politicians. And maybe it's not the case. Maybe it's just that I was not quite really involved yet. But it really seemed like it was 2 different groups of people. Mm-hmm. And here, I don't feel like there's that wall. I feel like if here during the session, you could just walk into the Capitol and have conversations with a dozen different legislators. And they're very open about it. You could stop into the statewide officials' offices. You might even catch the governor if you get it at the right time. Is a little bit harder to catch. But there's a lot more transparency and openness to the people.
Yeah.
I had been a PC precinct committee officer in Washington for the Republican Party in King County, and I felt like the Republicans in King County, that's where Seattle is, were demoralized and on the defensive. Mm-hmm. They had no idea how to win. They were just losing ground. Precinct by precinct was going from red to blue. The district I was in, both the legislative district and congressional districts had Republican representation. The election after I left, they all flipped blue. Oof. So it's just one by one. So it's also been interesting to come here and feel like on the offensive on a lot of issues, or at least we're having the debates. It's a red state, and we want to keep it that way.
Yeah.
So I wanted to get involved here. So after a couple years of just sitting back and getting to know Idaho, I'd been emailing various email addresses I could find, and nobody would get back to me. So I found some website with a calendar saying that District 14 was meeting on such and such a day. So I just walked into the meeting, and I walked out as an alternate delegate to the convention because they just needed people to fill spots.
Yeah.
And I went there, and I basically shadowed then Representative Gad Mordaunt. So I got to see the process up close and personal. Even got to sit and vote on the floor a couple of times. It was fun. That was a weird convention, by the way. That was the 2020 convention. They had to move it from Boise to Nampa because Boise implemented their lockdowns and mask mandates, and said that you couldn't have a gathering of more than 10 people or whatever it was. And obviously, the Republican convention, there's hundreds, even more than 1,000.
Yeah.
But Nampa was happy to have them, but there was still social distancing. So I look back at pictures of that, and everybody's sitting in chairs 6 feet apart. It's really weird.
That is really
but
weird.
that was my first taste of Idaho politics. So in spring of 2020, I walk into a room, and I don't know anybody there. I don't know what's going on. 4 years later, I was elected chairman of that same committee.
Awesome.
It's a crazy story.
Well done.
But
honestly.
It's all about just, we need people to be involved and willing to take the time to volunteer. Obviously, it's not a paid position, but it's just about, taking time to, be involved in your community, organize the committee, take the time to set up events, town halls.
Yeah.
So,
And you're on the same committee. Wait, you're not on the same one with Ryan Spoon, are you?
no, so a precinct committeeman is elected to represent your precinct. And that PC then sits on 2 committees. It's really confusing. It took me like 2 years to understand this.
Yeah.
One of them is a county committee. So you and all the other PCs of that county are together as the county central committee. Ada County has 197 precincts. So that is a large committee.
Yeah.
So Ryan is the first vice chairman of the Ada County Central Committee. You are also on another committee, your district committee. Idaho has 35 districts. Each one is approximately equal in population. There's about a little over 50,000 people per district. And
Gotcha.
that was carved up after the last census. So District 14 is my district, and it's even more confusing because District 14 is not entirely within Ada County. It's Eagle and all of Gem County. So there are 13 PCs from Gem County in District 14, and then 17 PCs from Ada County in 14. So we have a total of 30. Just over half of those, when they go to their county committee meetings, it's over in Ada County. The other half, the 13 from Gem, they form just by themselves the Gem County Central Committee.
Gotcha.
So our Ada PCs, our Eagle PCs, they go and join a big group of people, almost 200 people, as part of the Ada committee. The 13 who are from Gem, they themselves are the Gem County Central Committee.
Gotcha. Okay. That makes sense. That actually makes way more sense. Yeah, it is one of those things. John Grubb and I talked about that, how there's really and if you go looking for it, it's surprisingly inadequate, the information that you can find online about how do you go from, just being a regular Joe to president of the United States if you wanted to. What path do you have to follow? What positions should you hold? What thing can you do or whatever? There's nothing about it. Mm-hmm. If you don't go to school for politics or you don't get involved like you did, just head first, which I like that approach. That's my approach usually too. You're never going to learn. Someone's sitting on the outside watching in for years and years. I didn't learn anything. It wasn't until I started asking questions from the right people, that I started to learn things. And so that's really helpful information. I bet you a lot of people really don't know that. Mm-hmm. I would guess.
Like I said, even with me being involved, it took 2 years to finally grasp that org chart, basically.
Yeah.
And a lot of people still don't know. You walk your neighborhood knocking on doors, when you're running for PC and say, "Hey, I'm running to be your precinct committeeman," and they say, "What?
What is a precinct committeeman?
Or you want to go represent us in Congress in Washington D.C.?"
And so, what does that? What does that do exactly, though?
So a PC serves on those committees which decide things for the Republican Party. It's they Bigger committees like the Ada County Committee, they raise a lot of money and then use that to help Republican candidates. Technically, a county committee is supposed to support the county candidates, county sheriff, county commissioner, whereas a legislative district committee is built to support the legislative candidates, which are state representative, state senator. One of the duties of, say, District 14, our committee, is if anything were to happen to our 3 legislators, because every district has 2 representatives and 1 senator. If anything were to happen to those 3, tragically passing away, or, a happier thought would be, say, they got appointed to Trump's cabinet or something.
Right, something like that.
Just something that caused them to have to vacate that seat. Then our job is to come up with 3 names, give it to the governor, and he picks one to fill that seat. So that's one of the actual statutorily mandated jobs of these committees. At the county level, when a couple of years ago, Sheriff Stephen Bartlett resigned. And so it was the Ada County Central Committee that interviewed, I think, 6 candidates, and then took 3 of those and submitted those 3 names to the county commissioners. And those county commissioners voted to appoint Sheriff Clifford, and he's then since won re-election several times.
Okay, that makes sense.
So that's just one of the duties of those committees. But like I said, they raise money and support Republican candidates. The whole point is to get Republican candidates elected. But also there's in between elections, it's a kind of a go-between between the candidates or the legislators and the public. A PC, you run for PC, each precinct has a couple hundred voters. You knock on their doors, get to know them, ideally. They vote for you, so you now represent them in the Republican Party, and then you are now a conduit for information. If they've got a problem, if they've got an issue they want their legislators to know about, you're a good person to give it to, because then you can give it to the legislators and make sure it gets heard. They can still obviously make phone calls and emails, but this is another avenue for that. And then conversely, you also bring them information. Say, here's some bills. I remember you said you were interested in public schools. Where here's a bill about that, and you might want to go testify. And here's what the status is. So they're a go-between for information between their neighbors, their members of their community, and the people in politics.
That makes sense. That's all. Like I'm making sure I remember all of this. I love knowing this. I've wanted to try to make I forget what day it is, and I haven't wanted to admit to him that I forgot what day it is. But Ryan Spoon one time, just more sarcastically a long time ago, I think, invited me to the Ada County monthly meeting thing. I want to try to go to one just to see what it's all about.
Sure.
What day is those on? Do you know?
Ada County meets the first Thursday of every month.
The first Thursday.
And they almost always meet at the Ada County Courthouse in Boise.
Okay.
It's one of the few venues that's large enough to handle, 200 PCs plus all the guests who come.
Yeah, okay.
District 14, we meet every 3rd Thursday.
Every 3rd Thursday.
And we alternate our meetings. Our most recent meeting was last week in Emmett because, our District 14 is Eagle and Gem County, so we don't want to force one side to just always do the traveling.
Yeah.
For the next 2, we're going to meet in Eagle just so our legislators don't have to go all the way up to Emmett after a long day at work in the session.
Yeah.
But then we'll make it up by having 2 in a row in Emmett. So it's fun. It's been an interesting process of melding these 2 groups. They're very different. Folks in Gem County, they have a very different perspective, come from a different world. It's very rural, very agricultural, much more of a small town feel. Whereas in Eagle, it's very. Eagle has a reputation for being very high wealth. I'm not part of that. We just live there. But obviously it brings a different perspective. I like to point out to people that we do punch above our weight. The governor comes from my district. He lives in Emmett. And the attorney general comes from my district. He lives in Eagle.
Okay.
So we've got both of those figures who are kind of considered leaders of various factions of the Republican Party in Idaho. Just coming from the same district, which is fun.
Yeah, that is, and you are right. Gem County is also neighbors, touches Idaho County, and Idaho County is where I grew up. So Gem County you cross into in certain situations and stuff. So it is much more rural than definitely Ada County is for sure. I knew that Little was from the Emmett area or whatever. I didn't know that's where he got elected or whatever, though, first.
Yeah, he served in the legislature representing whatever district Emmett was part of at the time. Before 14, it was part of District 8. which now is Boise County, Custer County, Elmore County, and one more is slipping my mind. District 8 is one more county. Anyway, so yeah, the governor, before he was governor and lieutenant governor, he served in the legislature. His son is a precinct committeeman for Emmett.
And his son's the one that there was the whole controversy about the moving of the signs or something a while back, right?
There was some controversy about that. It was me doing my usual self. Oftentimes people on my side will be ready to throw bobs about something, and I'm the one who is a wet blanket and says, "Oh, let's hold on and get the whole story here." That whole thing was, I think, just a miscommunication, because you had a private property belonging to a bank, but it was a vacant lot, and somebody from there said, "Hey, you could put up this sign," but then someone higher up overruled it and said, "No, you have to take it down," and they went back and forth a bit. And, yeah.
So he was just going to do what he thought was supposed to be done, and it was at a time where people were taking videos and pictures. Yeah. So yeah, that checks out though. I mean, that makes sense. There's been quite a bit of that. I fell for I guess, negative Scott Herndon propaganda at one point in time, you could call it. I thought someone had told me in a conversation on Twitter, and this happened. I don't that he had once at a rally or whatever tried to tell people that he was, born and raised Idaho, and now I don't believe he ever said that. But so when I talked to him the first time he replied or something to me, I ended up getting blocked immediately, because I'm like, why would you do that? Why wouldn't you just admit you're from where you're from? And so rightfully so, he blocked me after that, and then.
Well, I'm sure if you send him a message and ask him nicely, he'd unblock you.
He might. Brian Lenny won't, but Brian Lenny is a block happy person. But you know what? You gotta do what you gotta do.
Well, some of these folks, like Scott Herndon and Senator Lenny, they're very forthright with their opinions, and so that attracts a lot of flack. Really, it attracts a lot of fire, and I personally block some people. If somebody's engaging in good faith arguing but they disagree with me, that's fine. But it's really the trolls and the parody accounts and the ones who are just using my comment to or my post to get attention, and if they're vulgar or just being downright mean, I'll block them there.
Yeah.
And other people, your mileage may vary. Some people don't block at all. Some people block, or block anybody.
Yeah, there's definitely different levels. Like Ryan Spoon seems to be a person who's very hard to get him to block you. I've been very surprised sometimes when I've come back and responded to him that he did not block me, quite honestly.
Well, sometimes it helps to have an in-person conversation, because until I actually meet somebody in person, I have trouble remembering who's who.
Yeah.
So if there's a lot of folks I interact with online, and this is just because I have trouble with names and faces. Until I actually have a conversation in person, it's like you're just you're basically a bot. You're an NPC, a non-player character.
Yeah.
You might have perfectly reasonable positions, and that's great. But until I actually meet you in person, it's I really don't know that you're a real person.
Yeah, well, and so I started recently. I just started. I broke my no block policy, because I had a zero block policy, no matter what people said. But I will block obvious porn bots.
Oh, sure.
And so I just recently just started doing that. You know what I mean? And so even that was like at first the first couple blocks or whatever was kind of like, I was like, I'm like, but what if they're a real person? They have something to say. So
even more than blocks, I use the mute button a lot.
Yeah.
So if somebody's like there's a lot of folks, the reply guys, or ankle biters, as
I've been that guy.
that just reply to every single thing I say with something inane or stupid. Oftentimes, I'll just mute them.
Yeah.
That way, I don't see them.
Yeah.
Maybe other people see them and engage, but I mean, like I said, I cut my teeth on arguing on the internet 25 years ago.
Yeah.
So I've learned since then that for what I'm doing, it's better not to just get dragged into the mud.
Yeah.
So oftentimes I'll just post something, turn off notifications, and people will be coming after me viciously in the comments, but I never see it.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah. Well, and that's what you have to do. I have Twitter is hard for me to get engagement on my profile. I do really good with comments, though. Like, I get huge engagement and huge notifications, and I get followers galore just off of like making funny comments on other people's things. I think my record is I got 17,000 likes on just one comment. Is my record to break. Yeah, and that's just a comment. But on my profile, dead. Like, it doesn't matter what I do so far, just dead. But Substack is different. Substack, I post stuff, and I guess I've figured out all these years. Like you said, I've been arguing for, not 25 years on the internet, but God, it's been close. And so, I've learned to, when to not engage and when to, how to word things a little bit better to, provoke people but not piss them off too much and stuff. That's the line, right?
Yeah.
So be provocative, but don't enrage them. So that's where I like posting this video of Trump posted it actually, and so I took it off of his profile and put it on Substack. It was him and Obama talking. Did you see that one?
Oh yeah, where he put in the voices of what they they're pretending they actually said.
Right, yeah. So I posted that, and I was like, obviously I know that's not real, but I posted on Substack, and I'm like, this is obviously fake, right? And so that's going to rile people up. Like, people instantly I got people, on the left that are like, are you effing stupid? Like, what do you mean? Of course it's fake. Obama would never talk to that guy. And I'm like, well, the video's real. Like, you realize
they were talking.
The audio is fake.
Yeah.
And so that's where it gets funny and stuff. So that's what I like.
Oh yeah, that's kind of fun. I mean, if somebody gets really angry and is arguing with me or attacking me in some way, sometimes I'll just respond with a GIF. It's just an easy way to show that I acknowledge that you're saying something, but I'm not going to take the time to respond.
Yeah, and I used to go back and forth in the comments and stuff now, but now everybody gets like one reply if you said something that like interests me in any way, but like after that, replies are not guaranteed. You know what I mean?
Did you ever see the movie Thank You for Smoking with the guy who was Two-Face in Batman?
I think I have, or it's one of those ones like on my list. It is the one where he's like a salesman kind of for like the tobacco company.
Yeah, he's a tobacco company lobbyist.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
So his goal, his job is to communicate, the virtues of tobacco and why the government shouldn't put it out of business.
Yeah,
and it's hilarious. But it actually, I think, it has some good lessons about being a communicator and being someone who's debating in the political world.
Yeah.
There's a scene in the middle where he's explaining his job to his son. And explaining that he's not the purpose of debating somebody like on a TV show is not to debate that person. You're not going to convince them.
Right.
It's about the audience.
Yeah.
All those people who are watching and listening, what are they going to come away with that interaction believing? And I've really kind of internalized that with the way I do social media.
Makes sense, yeah.
If I'm going back and forth with someone, I know I'm not going to convince them of my position. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's fun. Sometimes it's just amusing to do it.
Yeah.
But it's all about the people who are just watching, the lurkers, the ones who are just observing. How can I make sure that they come away from this debate believing that my position's the correct one?
Right, and that's a good way of going about it. That really is actually. And so I do that too sometimes. Another thing I do though is I like to learn, but that's where I wanted to start the show. Is I learn like a lot of times with like people like certain individuals, I ask questions like an absolute asshole online, I guess, because like I've just asked questions and had people block me. And it was legitimately an innocent question, but I get it where like online especially you have to worry about the gotcha.
Yeah.
It's that if I answer this question, that's clearly a clever question. If I say it the wrong way, this individual, KR Byers, Kenyon, whatever the hell his name is today, is going to, get me. And it's like, no, I actually just want to learn what you think. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I started the show is I was like, and it was actually Ryan, meeting Ryan. He told me, he's like, I'll be over here today. I'll give you 5 minutes of my time if you come over. And it was just, he was, saying that to me to, shut me up or to call me out, and stuff. Because I was very rudely calling him a coward, because he wouldn't come to the end of our street down here and talk to me on the corner down there, which is stupid. I didn't expect him to anyways. But I went and I learned in that moment that I didn't hate Ryan Spoon. I thought I might. I wasn't sure. But I thought I might hate him. But I realized I didn't.
He's one of those that has he's very different in person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's got a certain persona online, but then in person he's extremely reasonable.
Yeah. Well, and not even just reasonable, just like the way he was. Even in the midst of like what he was doing, he did stop and give me that 5 minutes. He told me he would, and he was very firm in his beliefs, and he was very confident in how he stated them. But then when he was done and told me he was done, he's like, I told you I would give you 5 minutes. Now I'm done. I got to get back to this. I respected that, because he wasn't like, now go away, be gone, shoo, or anything like that. And he didn't try to chase me off or anything. I turned around and I met Josh, the boss slayer.
Oh, Senator Josh Kaiser?
Yeah, I met Josh Kaiser. I didn't know that's who it was. I just turned around and started talking to someone. I'm like, I'm not going to leave just because you're done. I'm not. So I turned around and started talking to him. And we had a really good conversation. And I was like, you know what? I am done as much as I can fighting with people online. I'm going to meet them in person and find out what they're really about. And when I told Ryan that was my goal, after that meeting and stuff, I started messaging him occasionally and talking to him and stuff. You were one of the first people he recommended getting to know better. So I, immediately started following you and following, what you were doing. And I appreciated that you are someone, like you're saying, like he's not just saying this where he says that he tries to be peaceful and he tries to be respectful and stuff. This is actually, he has receipts. I've seen them myself. Like I wanted to know that it was true, and it is. It's true. He is very respectful, and I very much respect that about you, but I could see where if I just judged you off your policy choices, right? And that's all I looked at with you. And I was someone who hated people for that stuff, like we could possibly not get along unless I sat and actually got to know why you support those policies. Mm-hmm. And that's what I'm doing. I want to know why everybody is the way they are or believe the way they do. And I guess I have one life. I'll get to know as many as I can.
Well, when I was in school, when I was, grade school and high school, I was almost always the smartest person in the room, which, you think that's a good thing, but it's really not. And I realized that, kind of in my 20s that, I've capped myself because I just assume I know everything. So I set myself a policy after that of being the dumbest person in the room. I want to go hang out with really, really smart people and just be a fly on the wall. And I've done that for the last few years. I'll be at an event and I'll, be hanging out just, with the Attorney General, for example, Raul Labrador, or go to, some of my colleagues from when I worked at IFF, like Fred Birnbaum. And I often don't have much to say. I just sit back and listen because these are people who are, have brilliant minds. They've been involved in politics. They've got tons of experience. And I just want to soak that all up. I want to hear what they've learned and internalize it. One of the things that Raul Labrador has told me numerous times is that one of the reasons he's been successful is that he has a conservative position, but he takes a moderate tone. So he has conservative policy positions, but when he talks to people, he doesn't come across as like a right-wing extremist. He comes across as, just a normal guy who, has normal ideas.
Yeah.
And that's something I've tried to adopt as well.
That's a good lesson, yeah.
It's, here's my positions, but here, I'll explain them to you. I'll explain why I think they're good ideas and why they're not crazy right-wing wacko extremist ideas. This is actually reasonable and normal.
Yeah,
and so I've tried to follow that, and we'll see how it works. It makes some people grumpy who want me to be more aggressive, and there's lanes for people out there who are, I call them the bomb throwers. They're the ones at the tip of the spear on any issue.
Yeah.
And the good thing about them is that they're pushing the Overton window, pushing the window of what we're allowed to discuss, making us believe that things are possible that we might not otherwise have believed. The problem or the temptation with people in those positions is that they can turn around and they can throw their bombs backwards at the people on their side if they think that they're not being equally aggressive.
Yeah.
And you see that a lot. You see that a lot online.
Yeah, I got it from the left. The second I started doing stuff with the right at all, giving the right a voice too, like how dare I? Like I got a few of those people, like immediate blocks, immediate thrown under the table. And one like Sisyphus is a Twitter account. You see, it's like a blue and red like picture of like looks like a zodiac sign or something as their profile picture.
I think I blocked him a couple years ago.
I don't blame you. They blocked me. freaking weird, man. It's like, I just support people owning firearms. That's it. I don't care. Like, I'm not killing children. I don't want children to die. I don't believe that guns are the problem. I think people are the fucking problem. Mm-hmm. And we need to figure out why these people are behaving in this way and try to fight that, not the weapons.
One of the things you'll see online is that there's a whole bunch of people on left, right, center who I think of them as kind of gossip columnists, tabloid columnists. They want to make everything personal.
Yeah.
It's not about the policy. It's about the person. Mm-hmm. You know, how dare you repost that person? Don't you know that's a controversial figure?
Yeah.
And they'll come after me sometimes. There's this one fellow, won't even say his name, has his own Substack and blog, and apparently I've been featured in there numerous times about, oh, did you see what he said, or did you see the person he talked to?
I know who you're talking about.
And it's like, okay, whatever. Let's move on and talk about ideas. Mm-hmm. It really is that phrase that small minds discuss people while great minds discuss ideas.
Yeah.
It's I try to stick to the ideas. I don't want to make it personal. This is it. I think politics is already enough like Mean Girls, where, depending on who you're seen talking to, is you might get kicked out of the cool kids table.
Yeah.
It's already enough like that. Let's try and bring it back to policy and what are the actual effects of this legislation, not, oh, did you see who's carrying that bill?
Yeah. And I can see the fascination with both. Like, I've never been a big reality show enthusiast. Like, I've never found one that I really liked at all. Quite honestly, ironically enough, even though I did not support him at all his first run, one of the only reality shows I ever really liked at all too much was The Apprentice. And so, and I did not support Trump the first 2 times he ran. This last time, though, I'm like, give him the office. And obviously we all have our own reasons for things, but I do see where there are people who are going to be interested in both. I don't know why I keep looking over there. I probably need to put a sign over there that says, look back at your guest. So I do see where there are people who are interested in both, because reality shows do amazingly well. They make a lot of fucking money for a lot of people, so there are people who do just want to know the details of people's lives, but there are people who want to know the big picture, and what they're working on, which is, the beauty of discussion, because you can find, both out as long as you're willing to keep talking. And so that's the thing. Like, on the surface, like we were talking about, Ryan Spoon, on the surface, I've heard people say, some horrendous things about him and stuff. And, even before, when I didn't like him, one person was trying to dox him or whatever by being like, you have your address online, and I remember replying to him something like, I tell you what, you show up anywhere near Ryan's house at all, and you're going to have more people to worry about than just him. He might actually be your last problem. That's such a fucked up thing to do. I don't agree with your politics, so I'm going to threaten your family. He has kids there. Mm-hmm. They have kids there. If you don't care about Ryan, you want to see him hurt, fine, okay, whatever. But, his children, keep them in their place of residence out of it. That's why I decided to do this in my home. I'm like, come to my house. Everybody can know where I live now. That's why people have, threatened me now. They're like, oh, I'll find where you live. I'm like, I'll give you the address. Come on over. But, I will defend myself by all means every single time, because this is my home.
And it goes back to what we were saying about being anonymous.
Yeah.
People when they're online, even when they're under their own names, there's still that separation. You're looking at discourse through words on a phone, on a screen, and it makes you feel like it's not real. It feels like it's just like a video game.
Yeah,
you can go play an RPG and go, just kill everybody in the town because you're feeling grumpy one night.
Yeah.
Or some people log on to the internet and make vague threats against people they dislike. I don't think it's very healthy. But,
No.
People do it.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's not healthy. It's not healthy at all, and I discourage it. I really just don't respect it. Mm-hmm. Even if I don't like the person, I'm like, all right, let's cool down on the doxing a little or whatever, and that's how my name, my actual full real name came out there or whatever is, I got doxed. This person, was like, oh, KR Buyers, is that something buyers or whatever? And I'm like, dude, I literally have the only name of mine in the world. Like there's no other Kenyon Ray York Byerses on the planet. And so I said, so chances are you just randomly guessing it are zil to none. So we went and Googled it and found me. Tell someone you have a unique name. Kenyon Ray York Byers is going to stick out a little.
Sure.
And so he came back and was like, you should probably blah 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 blah. But that was like a moment I had been waiting for. I needed like my anonymity to be removed, but I couldn't do it myself. I don't know why, but it was just something that I knew was the way it had to go. And so that like the second that happened is when I went full force like on this. It was like Ryan Spoon and then that, and then I'm like, yep, on my way.
It is freeing in a way, because then you don't have to worry about trying to maintain that secrecy. I chose right off the bat that I was going to be out front with what I said. And I mean, it does have some downsides. I get occasional, angry people who, make threats, but it's whatever. I just block them and move on.
Yeah.
Sometimes my wife wishes I was more anonymous. But at this point, with as involved as I am in everything, there's no way to do it.
Right.
And it does mean that sometimes I say things, either I have to put my foot in my mouth or I say things that are misconstrued, and then people bring it up years later to try and, say that I'm some sort of crazy extremist.
Yeah.
But that's, haters are going to hate, I guess, is the mantra you have to remember. People will always find something to come after you with, so those people aren't worth listening to anyway.
Oh, dude, there's some, trust me, if anyone wants to go find just some absolutely atrocious things humans have said in their life, go find some of my history on Facebook. Like, I have been absolutely just horrid. Like, and I look back and I don't even know why. Like, just incredibly cruel and mean to people who did not earn it or deserve it. And it's like, that's like you said, it's like goes back to that, like the anonymity is a good thing, but it also can be a double-edged sword in the fact that like it does give people like that space to be like, well, I'm not me here, so I can just essentially, Grand Theft Auto this whole town, but with words online. I want to tear these actual humans down because I had a shit day and feel down. And I think that happens more often than not.
Sure.
I think like, the worst of the worst, the most vulgar, cruel, mean, people that find like the most insecure thing you have about you that you could possibly even consider ever. By the way, everybody, I'm not bald. Okay. Like I don't wear a hat because I'm bald. I get accused of that all the time. He doesn't care. And I don't care. You shouldn't care either. Like if you're going bald too, don't fucking care.
Well, it's like in Game of Thrones when Tyrion, the dwarf, said that
Tywin said, yeah.
Well, he said that people are going to find out what your insecurity, so it's best to just make it a shield. Just own it right from the bat. And I tried to do that too. I know all my insecurities, and I'm sure people find them out. So I just I don't let it bother me. Sometimes I'll even go out and insult myself just to remind people that I don't care.
Yeah, I didn't see that's where I came to is like. Along with some of the most horrific, the worst things that anybody would ever find about me that I've said online were about myself. At times where I was like attacking my choices in life because I've made some doozies, and so I thought you were going to use the quote, and I like that you use that one instead because that's a good one too. Use your weaknesses as a shield. I like that. Tyrion also said something that his dad had said once, Tywin or whatever, which was. That he didn't believe in half measures. So when he started balding at one point in his life, he just started shaving it bald. And it doesn't cover that in the shows; it's in the books. Yeah. But he just started shaving it all bald.
Well, that's what I did. I mean, I inherited my hair not from my dad, who still has a full head of hair at age 60 whatever now, but from my grandfather, who was going bald in high school. So I knew where I would be. So by about age 30, when it had gotten thin enough, I decided, okay, I'm done with this. Just maybe when I'm another 20 years older, I'll let it grow back a little bit, have the Patrick Stewart look. But we'll see.
Then that I don't even mind like Patrick Stewart. I don't think there's anything wrong with Patrick Stewart. You know what I mean? Like, I just don't. I guess some things I just don't get. Like, it breaks my heart. Like, I see this commercial. What's that disease? They call it a disease, impetigo or whatever. I don't think that's right, but it's where your skin is different colors.
Is that vitiligo?
Is that what it is? So it's like you'll see this commercial shows this young man who just like if we were looking at any other creature on this planet, right? you would look at that and you'd be like, God, those are some beautiful markings on that horse or that dog or that cat or whatever. But only with humans are we like, it doesn't look exactly like everyone else. It must be a disease. And it's like, no, man, it's just different human colorings. Like you picture like if people like were to just like prioritize that, right? Those different colored people, and like over 10,000 years of just prioritizing that, we would all be multicolored.
That would be interesting.
It would be interesting, but it's one of those things where I don't even remember where I was going with that. I actually wanted to shut myself up because I wanted to learn more from you while I have you here. Because, like you said, like it's better to learn than to talk sometimes, and I find myself doing too much talking. What are you working on right now? Like, what is your goal, like politically, for like this next calendar year?
Well, I'm just continuing to write about things I see. So Gem State Chronicle is, I'm trying to make it more of a fully featured website for people who are interested in politics. So it's got my daily columns. I write it. I'm not going to get one today because I'm recording this, late into the afternoon, evening now. So I guess tomorrow. I set myself a goal when I went independent of writing at least one thing a day. Usually I make that. And it's about some high level political philosophy idea I'm thinking about and how to apply it to our local politics, or it's just about some news. This is what's happening. Here's the 2 arguments or 3 arguments or whatever. It's like, grocery tax. Should groceries be taxed in Idaho? Some people are vehemently no. They should not be taxed. Other people are saying, wait a second, look at the numbers. It doesn't really add up to remove the tax. We got the credit. And so there's arguments on both sides, but people get very passionate about it. So I'll write about it, and then people will give me feedback. I'll write again incorporate the feedback, look at maybe a different perspective. That's a good idea. That's the daily column. I also have on the website something I call Session Snapshot. It's just here are the interesting bills that I think are important, and here's their status. Here's what they did in committee. Here's what people said about them. Here's how the committee vote went down, because that's not going to be recorded on the legislative website. Yeah. There's also Idaho Insider. It's here's all 105 legislators, and each one has a profile page which tells you. Their little biography, and just to take my editorializing out of it, I just copy it from their legislative website, which is what they submitted. Their pictures, so you know who they are, their electoral history, links to their Ballotpedia, links to their Sunshine Reports, links to their campaign websites, so you could go to their social media, their newsletter, their email if you want to email them. Here's their scorecards from a bunch of different organizations who rate the legislators and bills. So it's just a bunch of information. I'm trying to collect as much information as possible, put it in one spot so that people can come to the website and get what they need to be better engaged citizens. So that's my main project. I have a few side projects. I teach a homeschool pod twice a week. So that takes a little bit of time. I also do consulting for other groups. I do consulting for the Idaho Freedom Caucus. I help write their policy papers when they come out every couple of days with here's what we're working on, here's what we're doing in the legislature. With Matt Edwards on Idaho Signal, I go on there once a day with updates and analysis and write an article for them. So it's a lot of little things put together.
Yeah, it sounds like you stay busy though, at least. That's good.
I definitely am busy. What I love about it, as compared to say just a 9-to-5 job, is that it's flexible. Mm-hmm. Yeah, sometimes I might be working until 9 or 10 in the evening on something, but at the same time, I have the flexibility if I want to, play a game with the children during the afternoon. Yeah. So it's not set hours. It's a lot of hours, but it's not set hours. I can rearrange it as I see fit, and I can do a lot of work from home. Obviously, I try to get to the Capitol as often as I can because there's nothing like sitting in the committee room and actually watching them in person, because you can see what the camera doesn't see. Yeah, you can see if this person's talking, what kind of facial expressions this person over here is making. Mm-hmm. You can also catch conversations that are off mic, or you could just go talk to people. Once the hearing's done, I could just, hey, tell me more about this. You can't do that from home. Yeah. The advantage of home, though, is that I can do more things at once. I can put up 3 different committee hearings at once and just mute 2 of them and switch between them. Yeah. Yeah, and that makes sense. I agree, too. Like, I can get a lot done here, but the ability to, go do things in other places is also valuable as well. When it comes to those big, the more like the legislative
sessions, when do those take place? Like, is there a fixed schedule for those?
So in Idaho, we have a part-time legislature. They come into session the first Monday in January, and they stay until they're done with the budgets. According to the Idaho Constitution, the only thing the legislature actually has to do every year is pass a balanced budget. So they have to guess, this is as much revenue as we're going to take in, and these are the budgets for all the state agencies, and they have to match. Hopefully, they decide that there's enough extra that we get tax cuts.
Yeah.
Because those are always good. Otherwise, the state budget is just like a goldfish. It'll expand as much as they let it.
Yeah.
And so that's always the tension there. In the meantime, they can also pass other bills as well, base, education stuff and, whatever else is on their docket. And usually they're done by the end of March, maybe early April, depending on how long it takes to get the budgets done. And once the budgets are done and all their other priorities are completed, then they adjourn. Technically, it is a part-time legislature, but they work a lot. Because then there are interim committees throughout the year and meetings with constituents and all sorts of other stuff. And of course, campaigning, but we don't want to pay them to campaign.
Yeah.
That's their business.
Yeah.
They campaign every 2 years. Every even-numbered years. The entire legislature is up for re-election, all 105 of them, 70 in the House and 35 in the Senate. So this is an off year now. This is a brand new legislature. There's a couple dozen, freshmen who were just elected last year for the first time. So for them, it's a learning experience. It really takes a while to really understand the process. You have folks like Speaker Mike Boyle and House Majority Leader Jason Muggs. They've been there for a long time, so they know how the process works. People who are there brand new, they've got to learn fast.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's usually how it is in those situations, and that I think that's good. That's always my favorite way to learn. I hate it when I have to learn like slow or at a bunch of other people's pace and stuff. It's like either I'm going to learn slower than you sometimes, or I'm going to learn faster, but I just want to go. So, and so when they adjourn, is that the end of like also new bills and everything, or is that just the budget?
That's everything.
That's everything.
So the between the House and the Senate, each year they consider, maybe 600 bills. They start counting with it. This is a new legislature, the 68th legislature. It's the first session, and they'll have 2 sessions. So they start counting in the House from 1 and from the Senate from 1001, just to keep them separate. By the end of this session, the House will be at about 350, maybe 400, depending on how busy they get. And then they'll start again next year, but you have to start new. Once they adjourn, sine die, all the bills are dead, unless they've been passed and signed by the governor, in which case they become law. So if you have a bill that you like and you get it through the House and then you get it to the Senate committee, but you just run out of time and they don't schedule it for a hearing, it dies at the end of the session. So if you want it back, you have to bring it back as a brand new bill next year.
Ah, okay.
And you can see that happen. Representative Jared Crane of Nampa brought an immigration enforcement bill last year at the very end of the session, and it passed the House, but the Senate committee chairman just didn't put it on the agenda because it was the very end of the session. They were pretty much out of time. Yeah. So he's brought that back this year at the beginning of the session, and it's going through the process, and so hopefully they'll have more time to pass it.
And so is it just elected officials that can introduce these, or is this something like a regular person can also,
It has to be a legislator, but most legislators, if it's a good idea, are happy to work with you. Right. So if you come up to your representative, if you're here, it's your District 20, I assume. So you've got Representative Joe Palmer, Representative James Holtzclaw, and Senator Josh Kaiser. You go meet them and say, hey, I've got an idea for a bill, and they sit down and hear you out. They say, yeah, that's actually a great idea. Either they'll take it and draft it, or they might give you something called a purple slip, which allows you to work directly with Legislative Services Office and help draft it yourself.
That's cool.
But when it comes to actually introducing it, it's the legislator who will sponsor it and present it to the committee. But once it's at a committee hearing, you can come up and testify and say, hey, this was my idea in the first place. I think it's a great one, and I hope you pass it.
Yeah, I like that it's called a purple slip.
So this year, I'm actually doing that for the first time. I don't have a purple slip, but I've I drafted a resolution that passed through my Republican committee, and then it went to the state committee and passed there. So it's the official position of the Republican Party that once you win your primary, you should not be able to withdraw unless it's for something major like death or moving or major health issue.
Not just because
we've seen a lot where the Democrats do this a lot. The Republicans will do it occasionally too, but not as often, where they'll put somebody on the ballot for the primary, but then they'll wait to see who wins the Republican primary and either leave that person on the ballot or swap them out for someone else. Put in a ringer. And this past year, they tried to actually swap their candidates in District 11. They tried to swap one of their House candidates and their Senate candidate by withdrawing and then appointing them to the other side, which actually was against the law already. If you've withdrawn, you can't be reappointed. And it was eventually caught, and the Secretary of State's office made them go back to their original races. But the whole reason they tried to do that is because they've been getting away with this kind of legal loophole. In the 2022 Attorney General's race, you had the incumbent Republican was Lawrence Wasden, and he'd been there forever. So I don't think the Democrats were really planning to run against him. A fellow named Steve Scanlon filed to run as the Democrat, and he was unopposed for the primary.
Yeah.
And I think it was just we want to make sure we put someone in here, but we're not going to give it much attention or money.
Yeah.
In the Republican primary, though, Wasden was defeated by Raul Labrador. And suddenly here's this former congressman, former legislator, he's known as a conservative. So suddenly the Democrats were like, hey, we got to fight this. So Scanlon withdrew, and they brought in Tom Arkush, who was up to that point an independent. And so they figured maybe he'll attract more Republican support. And he did. He actually attracted Republican legislators, and politicians were supporting him because they were afraid of Raul Labrador in the Attorney General's office. But again, it's to me, it's playing games with the system. Mm-hmm. The whole point of the primary is to put your best people forward, and the voters choose, and that's your champion. Yeah. To play with it and play riggers. It's obviously that's what the Democrats did at the presidential level this past year. It didn't work out for them, thankfully. So anyway, I drafted a resolution condemning that and asking the legislature to essentially close that loophole. And I'm working with several legislators now on draft legislation that will address that. So it's just for me, it's an interesting process, learning how that works. And we'll so far there's no bill that's been introduced yet, but we'll see in the next few weeks if it gets there.
Yeah, so basically, it seems like a no-brainer to me. We don't play parent swap with politics, so you stay with where you were supposed to be. It's like that.
If you're willing to put your name on the ballot for the primary, mm-hmm. and you win that primary, then you should be committed to carrying out that race.
Yeah,
that's my opinion.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that. I 100%. I can't even believe that would be a thing, but it doesn't surprise me. I'd never obviously heard of it before now, but it's one of those things when I hear about new little tactics that any politician has used or whatever, I'm like, oh, I believe that. Other people are like, I don't know if they would do that. I'm like, oh, I believe they would do that.
There's this perception, I think, this kind of naive perception that politics is all just about debate and presenting your ideas, and then the best ideas win. But it's really not. It's there's a game there. It's like how football. The point of the game is to score the most points, right? Mm. But there's several layers to actually accomplishing that. Yeah. Even to the point of linemen learning exactly how to plant their feet before they block. It's very nitty-gritty technical details. So really, politics and elections is about getting more of your side to vote than the other side. Mm. It's not necessarily about convincing people that you're the right candidate. It's getting the people who will already vote for you out to vote. And so that's why you have get out the vote campaigns. That's why you have absentee ballot chasing. If the Secretary of State's website publishes people who actually request an absentee ballot. Yeah. So if you're a candidate, say in District 20, and you look at that list and see, okay, these 10 people requested an absentee ballot today, you will either send a postcard or you'll physically go to their house and say, hey, I'm a candidate for this race. I heard, I know that you got your absentee ballot, and I just want to make sure that you fill it out. Yeah. Now, in some states where they allow ballot harvesting, then you take that a step further where you say, actually, go ahead and fill it out right now. I'll just take it and drop it off for you, and you fill up your whole box with that. That's how the Democrats won in 2020 because they let people do
that. I didn't know that was a thing
in some states. Idaho banned it. So
okay, that's good. I don't like it. I don't.
So in Idaho, absentee ballot chasing stops at hey, I know you got your absentee ballot. I just want to make sure you fill it out and vote for me.
Yeah. Well, that seems fair. That's enough. Like I don't fill it out right now. I'm going to take it with me. You voting for me? I'm going to I'm watching who you're voting.
That
Margaret, don't fuck with me. Put my name down.
Well, see, the 2020 election, you have a lot of folks on the right who believe it was rigged in some way.
Yeah.
And when you say that, you conjure up images of stuffing ballot boxes just full of fraudulent ballots.
Yeah.
Or of just machines changing numbers,
Yeah.
which there might have been some of that. I don't know. But that's not what I focus on. It's really the fact that there's in deep Democrat districts, Chicago, downtown New York, Los Angeles, all these big cities, there's millions of people. Most of them don't bother voting. But when you change the system so that every one of them gets a ballot mailed to their address, and then, say if you're a Democrat volunteer, you can go to an apartment building and just go door to door to door and say, "Hey, you got your absentee ballot? Just fill it out, check it for Joe Biden, and I'll take care of it for you." That's how you end up winning and then running up that score.
Yeah. That checks out. That makes sense. And it's like, no, I don't. The whole thing, the election interference and stuff, the people who doubt that, it's like, it may not be on this huge scale like some people say, but there is definitely no election interference. You know what I mean? That's where I go. It's like, do I think that there's election fraud in this country? Yes.
Of course, if there's a way to cheat, people are going to cheat.
Yeah. Have I met Americans is the question I would ask in return. It's like, are we descendants of the Wild West, in the Revolutionary War, where it was basically the guys that were like, fuck you, England, we're done. Yeah, that's us. So do I think that we will do whatever it takes sometimes to win? Oh, yeah, for sure. It's a very competitive country.
Yeah, I mean, and there's stories of that going back to the past, the 1960 election between John Kennedy and Richard Nixon. Stories of stuffing ballot boxes in Illinois and Texas. In fact, Lyndon Johnson, it's documented that he won his first Senate race in Texas back in the 1940s with a ton of fraud. He makes connections with the right people, make sure that they get their skids greased, and they make sure to stuff enough votes in there, or when they're tallying it, put the correct numbers on there to make sure he wins. So that happened.
That doesn't surprise me, man. You probably know some of the other stories about him. Did you know he would whip it out?
Yes.
Yeah. That's where
he was an interesting politician.
Whip out your Johnson, calling it your Johnson. That literally came from one of our presidents. Yay. He was an interesting individual, though. There's no doubt that he took what your advice just a minute ago, and ran with it for a long time, not up forever, but be the dumbest person in the room. Because he did make people think he was pretty unassuming for a long time, as he worked his way up. And at a rapid pace, too, really. You watch, it's a fun career to watch with him. There's a few politicians we've had in this country that, their careers are just fucking boring. It's just they were born into a decent family, they went to a decent school, they made decent friends, and they became president. Whoop-de-doo. Whatever, But some of them who had to, be nitty and gritty and try to, grind and figure out their own way, those are the fascinating stories I like. Yeah. And so Lyndon B. Johnson's definitely one of them, so...
There's an interesting story about him. Before he became vice president, he was a Senate majority leader. So he's actually going up a level because the vice president's president of the Senate and can preside over the Senate. And some vice presidents have tried to preside over the Senate to the point where they want to be in control, whereas others, they just let it do its thing.
Yeah.
And it was interesting. The Senate as a body has always been very interested in its own prestige and its own autonomy. Mm-hmm. That's where you saw earlier this year with Republican activists wanted the Senate to choose Rick Scott of Florida as its majority leader.
Yeah.
Whereas the next two guys in line, the people whose turn it was John Cornyn and John Thune. And it eventually went to John Thune of South Dakota.
Yeah.
So and people were upset by that, but I wasn't surprised, because that's the way the Senate works. And our state Senate is kind of a microcosm of that. But you had Johnson, when he became vice president, figured he had been Senate majority leader, so I'll just continue running the show. And suddenly the Senate, which was his body, rejected that. They very much pushed against that, because the idea of the vice president actually trying to control things in the Senate, micromanage things, was just antithetical to everything they were about. So he got told off.
That's funny. Yeah, and that checks out. I see that kind of thing happen with certain groups in politics. It's you get to that next level or whatever, and you almost become more untouchable or less of someone people want to work with than before you even got started almost. I can't even think of any examples, but I've seen it before where, certain like celebrities, you'll see it where they get to a certain level where like they're almost so famous that they'll trump like anything you do in whatever show you do with them or movie you do with them. Like you will never get famous being with that person anymore or something, you know what I mean? So people like stop almost working with them unless it's other big, huge names that have like the equivalent level of fame, so they don't like end up like sucking all the other person's attention up. And so like, that does seem like to be kind of what happened is, and that does seem like something he would do, oh, I'm still in power. Definitely. I'm Johnson, whip it out and toss it on the table, and they're like, no, you're not, man. No, you go away.
You got to know your role. Stay in your lane. I think I saw that Marco Rubio, he was confirmed as Secretary of State like 99-0, basically unanimously. If you want to get someone confirmed in your cabinet, pick a senator, because the Senate loves elevating its own people.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if he ever came back as now Secretary of State and tried to dictate to the Senate something, I'm sure they'd have a different tune, because now he's in a different role. He's got to stay in his lane. The Senate as a body, it's always been very protective of itself.
Yeah.
And that's something that liberal or conservative, they've always agreed on that.
Yeah. And I remember being fascinated by the fact, like you just said this, that the vice president is actually the president or the leader of Senate or whatever. I didn't know that like the original elections until this last year with our own election, we had the Prop 1. And so I researched elections throughout our history and stuff. The vice president originally was the dude who lost.
Yep.
I'm like, well, no wonder we ended that, because that could not have gone well a few times. Like, there's got to be like, it probably wasn't recorded in history. They didn't let anybody write it down or whatever. But I bet you there were some legendary fistfights. But back when that was still a thing.
That system was only in place for a couple of years. It was in the original Constitution. So first election, 1789, George Washington wins unanimously. Only person ever to win the Electoral College unanimously. And then second place, because the electors always got 2 votes, was John Adams. And then same thing in 1792. 1796 is the real first contested election. You have John Adams against Thomas Jefferson, and Adams wins just barely. And so Jefferson becomes Adams' vice president, and they're at this point in their careers, they hate each other. But back then, the vice presidency wasn't really technically it could preside over the Senate, but that was really just ceremonial. The Senate can elect its own president pro tem to do the same job, and the vice president has no other constitutional duties. He just has to be ready to become president if the president dies, and even then, that was still people weren't sure of that.
Yeah.
So really, the vice president, in that case, he's just kicked to the curb, and then they face each other again. What the funny thing about the 1800 election, and the reason why they had to fix this, is because the party systems had formed at this time.
Yeah.
And so you have the Democratic Republicans of Jefferson and the Federalists of Adams and Hamilton, and the Democratic Republicans come up with a plan. They're going to essentially run Jefferson and Aaron Burr together. But in order to make sure Jefferson's president and Burr is vice president, they need one elector to switch votes from Burr to someone else. So nobody got the memo. So the Electoral College meets, and Burr and Jefferson get the same amount of votes. Everybody votes for both. And according to the Constitution, now that goes to the House of Representatives to decide. And suddenly Burr is thinking, wait a second, I could be president. And so he's telling his people in the House to vote for him, and Jefferson wants his people to vote for him. And so it's deadlocked for, they vote over it, over and over. And eventually they figure it out, and Jefferson becomes president.
Right.
And Burr, the sitting vice president, shoots Alexander Hamilton in a duel and has to go into exile. It was crazy times.
Yeah.
But it's because of that they passed the 12th Amendment, which clarifies that the electors' 2 ballots are one specifically for president, one specifically for vice president. So, and from then on, they ran as tickets.
Yeah.
But it's even then. This is just I enjoy reading history, so I'll research this. The vice president was never really an important role.
Yeah.
Obviously, if the president died, it became important. In 1864, Abraham Lincoln put Andrew Johnson, a Tennessee Democrat, on the ticket as his vice president. It was a unity ticket, showing that
together,
Republicans and Democrats are still loyal to the Union.
Right.
Andrew Johnson shows up for his own inauguration completely drunk. He is completely plastered, slurs through his speech, messes up words. Some of the newspapers apparently at the time were kinder than others and tried to interpret what he was saying and wrote it down that way. Others just put on all the slurs and mispronunciations.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then he ends up becoming president a month later when Lincoln is shot.
Goodness.
So that was crazy. It really wasn't until Harry Truman, Richard Nixon in the 40s and 50s that the office of vice president actually becomes part of the cabinet, and the president brings him in as an advisor and as somebody kind of an at-large cabinet member he could just send on missions to give portfolios to handle stuff.
Yeah, kind of like a left-hand man, so to speak, or whatever. You go do these things. I've got these things to do. Yeah, it is funny that for the longest time it was basically just a sit in pretty position.
It was often just something that elderly politicians who would get at the end of their careers. In 1900, William McKinley was running for re-election. Theodore Roosevelt had just become super famous. He had been the assistant secretary of the Navy. This is after being a New York police commissioner and an Old West sheriff, bounty hunter, and a boxer at Yale and a acclaimed author. He was an amazing guy.
Yeah.
But he had been the assistant secretary of the Navy and then resigned that to become the leader of the Rough Riders and took San Juan Hill in Cuba in the Spanish-American War.
Yep.
After that, he comes back, runs for governor of New York, and he wins. The Republican Party was worried about him because he was a progressive, so he was kind of at odds with the party leadership. So they thought the best place for him was vice president. So they put him on the ticket in 1900 as the vice president to get him out of the way. But then McKinley gets shot a few months later, and so Roosevelt becoes president. So that backfired on him.
That backfired horribly or wonderfully, I guess, however you want to look at it.
I was just going to say one more like that.
Yeah.
1940, the FDR's vice president has really fallen out of favor because he opposed his court packing scheme.
Yeah.
So that was John Nance Garner. He's kicked to the curb. In fact, he tries to run a primary against FDR in 1940 because this is, he's trying to run for a third term. It's unprecedented.
Yeah.
So he brings out a new guy, Henry Wallace, who had served as Secretary of Agriculture, I believe. And this guy's an outright socialist. He loves the Soviet Union, thinks communism is a great idea. And so he's actually vice president for 4 years in the middle of the war, World War II. Come 1944, FDR is running for a fourth term, and he's obviously in failing health. The Democrats, the conservative Democrats, are worried that this guy Wallace is going to be the next president. And so they force him off the ticket at the convention and put on this guy, Harry Truman, that nobody has ever heard of. And then Truman, of course, becomes president.
Good old Truman. Oh, man, we've had some characters. You can go through our history. I don't know their name. Maybe you know their name, but I know we had one person who won an election and gave a speech out in the freezing cold and ended up dying from hypothermia.
That was William Henry Harrison. I think he caught pneumonia.
Yeah.
And died a month into his term. And that was actually the first time a president died in office. And so his vice president was John Tyler. And some of the party officials thought that they interpreted the Constitution to mean that if the president dies, the vice president is acting president until we have a new election. But Tyler took it upon himself to interpret it to say, well, no, I'm the president now.
Yeah.
And he actually did the oath of office and served as president. And that became the precedent after that. And everyone else followed that.
And so that's where that kind of just started. Is he was just like, nah, this is how it's going to be, so this is how it's going to be.
Yeah, until it was actually tested, there was a disagreement about what the Constitution actually meant.
Oh, I bet that pissed people off back then so much when he just did that. He's just like, nah, I'm just going to do it.
They called him his accidency.
Yeah. And
he was hated by both parties. I think he had the record for most vetoes overridden or something like that. It was really kind of a lame duck presidency.
That honestly checks out so much, man. It's like I knew the second that Elon got involved in politics, I was like, oh, dude. The memes and the jokes about that guy are coming, and they're coming hard. And sure enough, it hasn't been a disappointment. Or it has been a huge disappointment, just depending on, I guess, who you ask.
Well, we think memes and political things are new, but it's like I said, John Tyler was his accidency, and Andrew Jackson was mocked as King Andrew the First because he was trying to really exert executive power. Yeah,
he was an interesting one. He's one of my favorite presidents, but not because I like him. I know that doesn't make sense, but God, you just said something that made me think of.
Well, it's interesting that Trump, both in his first term and now here in his second, has put up a portrait of Andrew Jackson in the Oval Office. It's just not sure if it's about policy or more just about personality, that this is somebody who stood up to the system.
Yeah. Well, and he did, and it's also, I like his story, because he really was so dirt poor he didn't own shoes, for a good part of his life, or a good part of his youth, and so I remember what I was going to say. So memes are not new. Information like that being transferred that way and pictures and funny and stuff like that is not new. And it is effective. It's so effective that most people still think Napoleon Bonaparte was short.
Oh, yeah.
But that was propaganda.
Yeah.
That was memes. Those were memes. They literally had pictures in the articles that would be him being all short and like rah, 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 mad and stuff, like like Sammy Sam.
Yeah.
And that was how like people in England believed he looked, how he was and stuff. He was belittled for his height, even though he was like average height. He's just normal dude. And so it's not new.
During the French Revolution, people said that Marie Antoinette said, "Let them eat cake," which there's no evidence that she actually said that, but that's what they said. She said,
yeah.
Or it's for a more contemporary example, Sarah Palin never said, "I could see Russia from my house."
Yeah,
that was Tina Fey who said that, pretending to be Sarah Palin.
Yeah,
but people will still remember that.
Yeah, and there's one that even I thought Trump had said it. There's one that he said, or people said he said rather, that if you go actually look, he didn't actually say it. And I can't remember what it was, but I remember like finally going and looking, and I was like, oh. Yeah. I had actually like thought that was fact, but it was not even close. And so it's nothing new. Humans, I imagine we're going to keep doing it too. I've spent a good part of this last year researching propaganda, and understanding, what propaganda actually is, how it functions, what it takes to function, appropriately and effectively. And I've learned through that research that pretty much everything can be propagandized.
Oh, of course.
If you just add an emotion to it. And it's usually fear.
Yeah, well, you would think that with the internet, with the, ubiquitous video of everything everywhere, that we would be more informed now about what's actually true, but I think it's actually the opposite. There's just so much information, whatever the truth is or the reality is drowned out, and really, what is reality? What is truth? Two people can actually go watch an event and listen to a speech, come away with a completely different perspectives of what was actually said or what what was behind the lines.
Yeah, exactly.
Between the lines.
The dress. I go back to the dress, that famous dress that we all saw, right? What did you see it? Did you see it as white and gold, or did you see it as blue and black?
I don't remember. I think I want to say it was white and gold. I've seen so many versions of the picture now where they've done color corrections or things. I can't remember.
Yeah, so I thought that was bullshit, and so I brought my kids in like one at a time, and asked them. And my daughter Mary saw it different than everyone else.
Yeah,
and it wasn't. I didn't coax her. No one had a chance to tell her what was going on, and she was little, at the time, she was a little kid, and so it was just that's these colors, and I'm happy that I even know these to tell you, Dad, and so I knew that right then and there, something happened in my mind, and it was this thing where I realized that reality really is in the perception of the individual. Like you're saying, like that is so fucking true. That's something like you learn if you research like detectives and actual police work and stuff like that. Is that something they run into all the damn time? Is you will have an event with 20 eyewitnesses, and guess how many stories there are?
At least 20.
Yeah, at least 20 different stories.
Yeah, Kurosawa made a movie about that.
Yeah, exactly. So, who?
Akira Kurosawa. He made a movie called Rashomon. It tells the same series of events from 4 different perspectives.
Oh, that sounds cool. I'll have to look at that.
And there's other movies and TV episodes that have used that same theme, but that's really the one that started it.
And I like that theme, so I'll have to check out that movie. I like that narrative and stories and stuff. Yeah. Because it does just highlight, like I said, like experimenting with replying to similar people with different responses, and seeing where it really does affect them. To where if you reply to similar people with the same response, you'll see you get the same response. And so it's just interesting. It's weird how we have these, as a species, these weird little hacks or something, that like our minds do, and no one realizes it until like all of a sudden someone's like, this is how our brains work. And then it's so obvious.
Yeah.
And so, We should probably wrap it up. God, I don't even know how long we've been talking.
It's been a while, but it's a good conversation.
Yeah, it's a good conversation. I like longer episodes. I'm not into the shorter ones. I tried doing shorter ones at the beginning, and they just feel stupid and rushed, and you don't even get to the good part.
Well, this is, I think this is the future, and older politicians, they're trained to go on Fox News and give, or CNN, depending on which side you're on, and give a little 30-second or maybe 2-minute, rundown, their elevator pitch of whatever they're doing. But now you've got, this last election was defined by Trump and Vance going on the Rogan show and Theo Von's show and just having long, sprawling conversations.
Yeah. Yeah, I like J.D. Vance, by the way. I don't care what anybody says about that man. And if you, seriously, I love when they call him, racist and stuff. I'm like, how, dude? Explain to me how. Explain to me how. It's like Elon being racist. I'm like, he employs more Asians than, any other community in the world. Even Asian companies are like, man, employ a white person here and there, or whatever. And it's yeah, racist people don't hire ethnicities. I grew up around real, actual racist human beings, and they wouldn't be anywhere near someone who wasn't white. They wouldn't. They would refuse. They will leave the room if someone not white comes in.
J.D. Vance is such an interesting story, and I've been following him for a couple years, since even before he got to the Senate, just because he's, again, such an interesting story. He wrote Hillbilly Elegy about his, growing up in his environment. He's got his family that comes from Appalachia, and, growing up in a poverty in a small Ohio town. His mother was addicted to drugs and abusive, mentally ill. He gets out of that, serves in the Marines, comes back to Ohio State University, graduates, goes to Yale Law. That suddenly opens a bunch of doors for him. He works with Peter Thiel in Silicon Valley, and then he runs for the Senate, and now he's the vice president of the United States. It's not only an amazing story that shows the American dream is still possible, but it also, I think, it gives him a completely unique perspective. He knows poverty. He knows the white working class of Appalachia who's lost their livelihoods when all the factories went offshore. But he also knows the world of the Marine Corps and the discipline. He also knows the world of Yale Law and the really upper crust. He knows Silicon Valley. He's experienced all these different worlds that are all part of America, and now he's going to be a voice for all of them in the White House.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. I think you're right on. I think that's a great place to leave it. If anybody disagrees, feel free to let Brian or I know. And you have one of those names, I wanted to bring this up, that I see and I want to pronounce it a certain way, but sometimes, there's a different pronunciation. So part of me wants to pronounce your name Amon. No. But part of me it's Almon.
Almon.
Okay, so it's like almond without the D. So
exactly.
Almon. Okay,
that's
so
how
Brian
I've explained
Almon.
it since I was a child.
So Brian Almon, man, it's been a pleasure to have you on. Everybody said you were a good guy to know, and I think they're right.
Oh well, appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, and thanks for the conversation.